Welcome to Andy Staples On3. And if you heard Ralph Russo from the Associated Press last night, it's not college football season until the first AP poll drops. Well, folks, welcome to college football season because we have an AP poll. It dropped on Monday at noon Eastern time, and it surprised absolutely none of us when Georgia was an overwhelming favorite at number one. All but 3 of the 63 first-place votes went to the Bulldogs. 2 to Michigan, 2 to Ohio State, none to Alabama, which starts outside the top 3 of the AP poll for the first time since 2009. What happened in 2009? That was Nick Saban's first national championship at Alabama. And I believe the other fun stat I saw on Monday was the last 3 times Alabama has started outside the top 2 of the preseason AP poll, the Crimson Tide have won the national title. So there's that. We played Nick Saban cracking jokes yesterday. I said, be afraid, be very afraid. A lot of Georgia fans were like, we're not afraid. And okay, you don't have to be afraid, but maybe everybody else probably should. Okay. Look at the poll again. It's all guessing. It's all for entertainment purposes. It's all to get us talking. And I do enjoy where Texas is at 11 because, again, Texas will be favored probably in 11 games this season, especially if we put the lines out right now, they'd probably be favored against everybody except Alabama. So you've got the Longhorns there, but then, of course, those who don't believe in the Longhorns will say, well, the media's overranked them again. Yeah, maybe they did. I say they and not we because I don't vote in the AP poll anymore. But you've got Tennessee at 12. Notre Dame at 13. Notre Dame, another lightning rod team. How the team that lost to Marshall and Stanford, how can you have them that high? Well, it seems they think they upgraded at quarterback, so maybe that's why. And then, of course, Texas A&M at 23. The Aggies, it's amazing how the cycles work on this thing because you'd think we'd learn our lesson at some point. Like, we hyped Texas A&M up going into last season because they did have all that talent. They'd signed that number 1 recruiting class. They didn't even make a bowl game. But we can't help ourselves. We keep saying, nope, got to come back around. And maybe that's true because, as I've been saying, if you take that second tier in the SEC West, so you've got your Alabama and your LSU at the top, whatever order you want to put them in. But you take the next 5, A&M, Auburn, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, however you want to order them. They all feel like toss-ups, except for the fact that Texas A&M is the most talented of those teams. So if one was to surge above the rest, that would be the logical choice. But again, can we wait till maybe week 2 or 3? Like maybe they go to Miami and win convincingly. Do we have to do this right now? It's just going to be worse if they're not good. So, but it is amazing that is kind of how these things go. But I am excited because it gives us something to talk about, something to argue about. This Alabama thing is fascinating because I tweeted that Nick Saban clip that we played on the show last night, his Sparky Anderson quote, where he's probably said that 10 times in a press conference over the years. But it's just the lightness of his mood. And I have people say, oh, Andy, don't you know it's when he's mad that they're good? It's not when he's lighthearted that they're good. No. When he's light in camp, they're usually okay. Pretty good, maybe. He gets mad during the season the more he realizes they're good. I'll give you a prime example. 2008, they go to Georgia, the blackout game. Georgia was the preseason number 1. Alabama just annihilates Georgia in the first half, but then kind of messes around in the second half. It wasn't going to cost Alabama the game. Georgia wasn't going to be able to come back. But Nick Saban was breathing fire in the press conference after that game. That's the Nick Saban mad because his team is good. But he needs those particular circumstances. When he gets a little loose, it is time to worry. Although, if you ask Miss Terry, she says he's been getting more laid back, or as laid back as Nick Saban can be for the past few years. It is a strategic change in the era of NIL and in the era of the transfer portal that you got to coach everybody differently. He will tell the story that it was J.K. Scott that convinced him of that you could be a little bit lighter. You could do it differently. You don't have to coach everybody like your hair is on fire all the time. But I don't know. I just get the sense that he's feeling pretty confident right now. I think he feels like we're sleeping on him. And I don't know that we actually are sleeping on him that much, because I would have said a few months ago LSU will be ranked ahead of Alabama when all the polls come out. And they're not. Now, if LSU plays Florida State, beats them handily to start the season, and Alabama struggles with Texas, then maybe you'll see that them swap places. It doesn't matter. They're going to play each other. But I just feel like Nick Saban is telling us that he thinks this team's pretty good. And the quarterback thing, I will worry about it when I feel like I need to worry about it. They got 3 choices. My guess is they're going to be able to figure something out. I don't think they're going to be non-functional at quarterback. And I also think they're going to be able to run the ball very well, which that solves a lot of problems. So we'll see about that. But let's go elsewhere in the SEC. And it's a Dear Andy show. Now, we have Mike Norvell from Florida State coming on, and it's a great interview. We're going to talk to him before we do most of the Dear Andy questions. But I do want to answer one Dear Andy question right off the top. It's from Caleb. How many plates of enchiladas and bowls of free cheese dip from Tara Humara's is it going to take for me to forget OU losing out on Nwaneri? So Nwaneri is Williams Nwaneri, who is the #1 defensive lineman in the class of 2024. He committed on Monday to his home state school of Missouri, the Missouri Tigers. Let's watch Eli Drinkwitz and company when they got the news. Yeah! That is Eli Drinkwitz leaping into the arms of his assistants to celebrate getting the #1 defensive lineman in the country in the class of 2024. And this is an interesting deal. Now, it's not the first time that Eli Drinkwitz and Missouri have gotten a recruit of this caliber. Luther Burden, the receiver, signed a few years ago. Similar ranking situation, 5-star guy. But what's going on? And Josh Newberg from On3 tweeted about this on Sunday night, and people were like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" Because Williams Nwaneri was predicted to commit to Missouri. It was not a surprise that he was committing to Missouri. Now, he can start doing NIL deals. He can actually sign a financial aid agreement with Missouri on September 1st and begin doing college NIL deals. It's something that the state of Missouri has allowed because of its law. Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma all have fairly similar laws where they incentivize in-state kids to go to in-state schools. And you can say, well, that's cheating. Well, how's Missouri going to get the #1 D lineman in the country any other way? How are they going to do that? Are they going to be in the mix for that most of the time? No. And would they be in the mix for him if he was not from their state? Maybe not. But Georgia was the other finalist, or one of the other finalists. Georgia has been getting all of these guys, and Georgia is still probably on target to have the #1 class in the class of 2024. But interesting numbers, and I thought Josh Newberg made a great point with this, that NIL is helping create more parity rather than, and we told you, if you listen to anybody who took high school economics or people who studied economics for a living and became economists, we told you that this was going to happen. That's how markets work. So when you hear Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, or one of these conference commissioners, or one of these ADs saying, NIL is going to kill it, it's going to make the rich get richer and widen the gap. No, it is not. Now, is it going to widen the gap between Toledo and Missouri? Yeah, probably. But it's not widening the gap between Missouri and Georgia. It's narrowing it. It's not completely narrowing it, but it is happening because there are players who certain schools will make an NIL priority, and others they're not going to be as big a priority because they are recruiting guys of a similar caliber and they cannot put as many resources into that one guy. And so it will be a choice that some schools make. And it will mean that sometimes a guy who would have gone to one of the schools that usually gets the 5 stars, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, that type of school, go somewhere else. Maybe they go to Missouri. Maybe they go to Tennessee. Maybe they go to Texas. Maybe they go, who knows? That's what makes this interesting. And so I looked at some numbers here, and I wanted to see just how clustered the 5 stars were over the years. And I went to the On3 industry rankings. I went back to 2016. So 2016, 16 of the 32 5-star players, so half of them, went to one of 4 schools: Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, or Georgia. In 2018, 18 of the 32 5-stars went to one of those 4 schools. 2019 was a bit of an oddball year, only 11 of 32. But 2020, back over 50%, 17 of 32. 2021, 18 of 32 went to one of those 4 schools. Now, 2022, what changed? Oh, well, that's when NIL came in. 12 of 32. Last year, 12 of 32. So far this year, 10 of 23 that have committed. Now, there are going to be a couple more who go to Georgia or Ohio State or Clemson or Alabama. Now, is this definitive proof of anything? No, it's not. We haven't had enough time. There's not enough data. And you really need to do it further down the line, because obviously Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State still getting the most talented classes. But some of those guys, some of their top targets are being sheared away. And the more you shear away one at a time to each other's schools, it narrows the gap. Is it completely narrow? No. Georgia is still much better than Missouri from a talent standpoint. But just as Georgia has changed the dynamics between Alabama and everybody else by taking guys that Alabama would have wanted, if a Missouri can get somebody that Georgia would have taken, that helps everybody else. So we'll see what happens, but it is going to narrow it somewhat. Is it going to narrow it completely? No. The schools that care the most about football are always going to get the best players. That's how it works. But you will see situations where the number 1 player at a position group goes somewhere other than Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. I'll give you an example. KJ Bolden, Buford, Georgia, the number 1 safety in the country. He has committed to Florida State. When we come back, Mike Norvell, the head coach of Florida State, will join us. And while he can't speak about KJ Bolden specifically because he's an unsigned class of 2024 commit, he can talk about how the recruiting pitch has changed at Florida State since he got there, because he's getting to sell something different now. And there's a question at the end of this that's 2 years in the making. I love his answer. Mike Norvell when we come back. We are joined now by Mike Norvell, Florida State Seminoles head coach, coming off first pad popping scrimmage of the season on Sunday night. Mike, how do you handle that? How do you handle how much contact, how hard you're going to go as you prep for a long season?
Well, I mean, there's been plenty of pads popping through these first 9 days. And, last night was the first, full tackle, taking guys to the ground, work we've got, and it's necessary. I mean, in our team, we know there's only one way you get tough, and you got to go practice it. You got to practice toughness. You got to compete. You got to, we're going to be very smart in how we do it. But, that's one of those competitive edges when you're willing to be physical, when you're willing to prepare yourself and train to be able to do it for an entire season. I mean, that's part of our process of growth. And, I've really been pleased with the way that our guys have gone about it through 9 days. I thought last night, there was a lot of good work, having everybody, just like a game situation, being on the sideline, seeing some young guys have to communicate, go out and execute, out there at Doak Campbell Stadium. I mean, it was a lot of fun, and, I thought it was a productive scrimmage.
Is that physicality something you can adjust, or something you can have a little more of now that you're deeper on both lines of scrimmage than you were, say, 3 years ago?
Well, I mean, it's I do like our depth, and the competition is probably what helps elevate it, in a lot of ways. But for us, it's like I said, there's just only one way to get it. You can't hope about, being tough. I mean, you got to go prove it. You got to go earn that distinction by the way that you perform, the way that you play. And that's something that our guys embrace. And it's a 365-day, process to grow and develop that, whether what they're doing in the weight room, the way that they're taking care of their bodies, our athletic training department, they do a remarkable job. And, our guys, they embrace that strain. And when you look at how our teams grow through the season, it's something that it's got to be earned. And I think our guys, as much as any year before, I think they've embraced that for these first 9 practices, and I really like what they're showing. And we got to have a huge week this week, as we're in our second week of kind of that last week of camp that we're rolling through. It's going to be critical.
I heard you use that word strain earlier this offseason, talking about one particular play, and it's the blocked extra point against LSU last year. And as you prepare for LSU this year, how much can you go back to that one? Because most people think of an extra point as an automatic, as a given. If you don't block that, you might not win that game. We might look at your season very differently if you don't block that extra point. How much can you point to that as you're talking to your players about, hey, in that moment, that one little extra effort can mean everything?
I mean, those are those program defining moments. And, it's, even when the touchdown was scored on the last play, I mean, I remember standing on the sideline and just holding up one finger, one more. You get one more play. And, to embrace the opportunity, to understand that each play matters. There was plays earlier in the game that put us in that position for the positive. There was plays in that game that put us in a position in the negative. But every play matters. And just to be able to have that as an example where every player, a part of this program, remembers that lived it. It was on a grand stage. So it was a great moment for our players to show the strain and to be able to capitalize, in that opportunity. But, it's all part of, the emphasis of what we try to bring every day to practice. And then, what has to show up on each and every play there on a Saturday night.
So I went on the War Chant message boards, and boy, they were thrilled to have a University of Florida grad on their message board. But ask them, what would you like to hear Mike Norvell talk about? What would you like to know from him? And one guy named Invictus Seminole had a great question that I am going to pass along to you. How did you and your staff and Jordan Travis himself take the guy who, when you got there, said, hey, I might need to change positions, and turn him into what he is now in terms of a leader and a guy who basically your whole team would follow anywhere?
And it truly came down to work. And, we had a great plan and in helping Jordan develop, to build confidence in what we were asking him to do. We're a rhythm-based, passing offense. And, that's something that, I think Jordan, thrives in. And as he grew more confident in rhythm, timing, he's an extremely smart quarterback. He understands progressions. He understands, protections, where the ball needs to go in a very, quick process, in his mind. And I think just as he's worked through it, and as he's had to go through the highs and lows of playing quarterback, I mean, he's experienced it all, but he's never backed off. He's continued to push. I've had the utmost confidence in where he would develop and what he would grow into. He's done nothing that he's done has surprised me. And, I have the highest expectations for him. And I believe the sky's the limit to what he can accomplish, not only, in his final year here at Florida State, but in his future, because of the work that he's willing to put in. And, I think that's what makes him the leader. And, when you're willing to do the hard things, when you're willing to push yourself, and when you're willing, when you get knocked down, to get up and continue to stay focused on the journey. I mean, that's what he's lived out. And, he's a special player and a special man.
So a couple springs ago, you had him, you met with him, you had him go out and look at the trophy case, and where you can see Jameis Winston's Heisman and Charlie Ward's Heisman, and you said you can be this guy. At that point, did he believe he could be that guy?
I hope that he did, and I would say that the work that we've seen and the way that he's grown, I would say that he did. He just maybe might have needed somebody else to also know that they were going to be a part of that journey with him. And that's one of the things that, I believe in him. I think he's got great talent. I think he's got great ability. He's got great character, and he cares about others. And when you have those traits and a work ethic, behind it, that's going to be willing to push. And, as we've grown the supporting cast around him, I think it's really just all come together for him. And, you see that in the way that he plays, and you also see that in the way that he prepares on a daily basis.
So my friends at War Chant also had a bunch of gray hoodie questions, which I noticed you put the gray hoodie from last season up for auction for charity. But my question is about this, because I've asked multiple coaches about this. I've had Matt Rule, asked him about the smock that he wore at Baylor. We had Biff Poggi from Charlotte on. He doesn't coach in sleeves, which is something you might be able to consider. But how do you decide what your signature sideline wear is going to be? Do you decide that at the beginning of the season to say, this is my thing, or is it game by game?
It's game by game. Really was the thought process. I mean, there's certain things I like to wear. I mean, I like wearing hoodies. So,
yep.
But there was a few games last year where I didn't wear them, and I tell you, the fan base, you made sure our equipment managers knew that there was a desired look that they had, but I'm not overly superstitious.
Okay.
So, but I think our fan base really is, and so we had a lot of success in a gray hoodie, and we rolled with it. But if it was only as easy as just wearing a hoodie, I probably wouldn't work as much. And so, I mean, it's, but I like the look, and, we'll see what Nike has for us this year. And, I know our equipment manager, Jason Daysden, I mean, he's doing everything he can to make sure he puts it just right. So we can find the apparel that's going to take us to the next level.
I wasn't sure if it was a Steve Jobs, Homer Simpson thing, or one less decision to make. This is what I'm doing. When
I get to the stadium, I see what's in the locker, and then usually roll with it.
So I found this clip from 2 years ago, and it's interesting because you are usually very calm in your press conferences, very reserved. You are trying to keep yourself from cussing in this clip. You guys had lost the first 4 games, and someone asked you in a press conference about what you sell to recruit. So I want you to listen to this, and I have a question for you afterward.
When you lay out the vision of what you want, you live it out every day. And the best recruiters we have on here are the players, because they're the ones that get to talk about what it is day in and day out. How our coaches care about the players, how our coaches invest, the focus on teaching fundamentals, the focus on putting playmakers in an opportunity to make plays. But we've got to go out there and we've got to do a better job in every one of those areas. But I'm looking for guys that want to be a part of that process too. The guys that want to be successful, guys that want to be challenged, guys that are willing to step up and step out and go do something that, they're going to have to defend. Well, why there? Because it's the best dang fit for them. It's an opportunity where they're going to go get pushed, they're going to get developed, they're going to have an opportunity to play at one of the greatest places in the country, right? With a wonderful fan base that cares. Right? I mean, look, I'm pissed off that we're 0-4. Right, and we can bring up how many years it's been. I don't really I can't control that. I can control this team at this moment and right now with the opportunity. And so we're going to work our butts off to go get better. And we're going to do it the right way. And we're going to have a standard of how we operate. It's going to be the same standard that we're going to ask them to do in a classroom, the same standard of everything that we do. I'm going to hold myself to it because I got to be the example. And you know what? Does that mean I'm not going to make a mistake? I'll probably make a mistake. Might make one today, might make one tomorrow. But I will respond to that. And so that's the team I want because I've seen it work.
Okay, my question. That was 2 years ago. Is that the team you have right now?
I'm really proud of the guys that have been through that journey. I've been proud of the guys that have chose to come and be a part of it. Even through some challenging moments, guys that embraced it. And we've worked our butt off, and I've had guys that have stepped up. And you feel that in the culture of this team. I mean, this is a team that likes to compete. They want to work. Have we been knocked down? Absolutely. And but we have gotten up. And we've gotten better, and we've continued to improve. And it's a daily process for us. And we try to learn from every example that an experience that we've had. But I love coaching this team. I love the guys that I get to do it with. And we've got some players that have really taken some monumental steps in who they are, on the field and who they are off the field. And, I'm glad just to be able to be a part of the journey with them, side by side. And, each day, we try to be the example for each other. And, I think that puts us in a great position to achieve, wonderful things here as we continue to move forward.
I know you can't talk about specific players, but obviously recruiting for the future going pretty well right now in terms of the guys from high school that you've got committed to you. Has the sales pitch changed since then? Has it had to change because of the success you've had?
No, I mean, it's, as you have success, the vision is not one that's hoped for, it's one that's being lived. And, when guys can see themselves in current players, when they can see themselves out there doing the things that you want them to do, when you can paint a picture of this is why you are such a great fit for what we're doing, because they see guys on the field, doing it at a very high level. And then, it's also who we are off the field. And, to be able to talk about an all-inclusive program, I mean, we're excited about the 10 wins last year, top 10 finish, all those things. We also had the best team GPA ever in program history. We're over a 3.0 football team academically. That's a team that embraces the challenge to just be better, to go be their best, whatever it is, things you like, things you dislike. But when you're willing to live up to that standard, I mean, it's important. And when you find guys that, are willing to take the road less traveled, just to push themselves in every area. I mean, usually great things happen and you get like-minded individuals. So, it's the message hasn't necessarily changed, but the examples of what it can be, that's been proven. And they've seen the growth in our program, and they know that they can bring a new element and even a higher performance of ultimately where we want to go.
So I have to ask you this before I let you go. As we sit here on Monday, August 14th, any big announcements planned?
Any big announcements? Not that I know.
I had to throw it in there. I know you're like, dude, stop. I gotta worry about LSU. I can't worry about this other. But seriously,
my big announcement is we're gonna be practicing tomorrow morning, and there's gonna be some pads popping in Tallahassee. That's a big announcement.
There you go. With all this other stuff going on at the presidential trustee level, is it hard as a coach to keep everybody focused on the thing at hand?
No, I mean, it's what we have to live. We talk. I've been asked so many times about expectations for this team this year, and a year ago, there weren't many outside expectations. There's plenty of people that tell us, that we weren't very good, or they didn't think we'd be very good. And if we got caught up in listening to that all the time, then probably would have. You lived up to what others' expectations were. For us, it's about controlling ourselves, controlling what we do on a daily basis, continuing to grow, continuing to improve. There's a lot of talk always around this program because it's a special place, it's a special program. We got great fans, we have wonderful administration, and so it's kind of part of the the job and part of the position you put yourself in whenever you come and play or coach at Florida State, which, it's a special experience. And, but what we can control is the work that we invest into it, and, the standard of how we show up on a day in and day out basis. So, we're going to continue to work. We're going to continue to push and make sure we represent this program the way it deserves to be represented.
You heard it here first. Tuesday, August 15th, 2023. Pads will be popping in Tallahassee. That's the announcement. Thank you, Mike.
I appreciate you, Andy, and you have a great day, and go Noles.
August 15th, key day at Florida State, because August 15th is the deadline should an ACC school want to announce its withdrawal from the ACC for the following year. I don't get the sense that there's going to be a big announcement at Florida State. Now, you can always hold in the back of your mind that in this situation, Florida State may go rogue because you've seen what's gone on with the president and the trustees. But if you go back to that last trustees meeting when all of the trustees were talking about how Florida State needs to get out of the ACC, they basically said, hey, it may not be right now. It may be a year from now. I think probably being ready to make such an announcement by August 15th, 2024, to be in another conference by 2025, that probably feels a little more realistic. Now, listen, Florida State may surprise us, but I know like Matt Baker, who covers the Florida universities for the Tampa Bay Times, spent the day refreshing the Florida State Board of Trustees meetings webpage because they would have to post a public meeting 24 hours in advance. They had not posted as of yet. So as we're recording this, 8:31 p.m. Eastern time on Monday night, nothing has been posted. So not expecting any sort of announcement. The guys at War Chant are On3 Florida State site, not expecting an announcement right now. But again, a school where the president and all the trustees will get up and say, hey, we may be doing this, that we got to get out of this league. When they will say that publicly, when no one else will, even though other schools are thinking it, we can't completely predict what they're going to do. So we'll wait and see on Florida State. But right now, it's time for Dear Andy. We've already teased you with one Dear Andy question. And I do want to point out, so Caleb, who asked the Dear Andy question about Williams-Nwaneri, he's an Oklahoma fan. He was asking how many enchiladas he's got to eat at Tarahumara's and how much free queso. Tarahumara is the best Mexican restaurant in Norman, Oklahoma. A great quirk of Norman and some of the other kind of OKC suburbs, free queso. They don't make you pay extra for it. So just wanted to pass that information along. I feel like that's the service we can provide you here at Dear Andy. But we got some other really good questions. Lots of you sent them in, and they pretty much run the gamut. Let's start with Tom, who asked about a guy that we had on the show earlier this week, Sonny Dykes.
Dear Andy, I just graduated from TCU, and I just finished my first day of medical school at the University of Oklahoma. So my question to you is, do you think TCU wins another playoff game first, or OU wins their first one after having gone 0-4 in their first four? Secondly, if Sonny Dykes keeps TCU in the playoff hunt in the Big 12 championship game, do you think he would leave for another job? Or do you think if conferences do implode in 2034 or 36, TCU could get pulled up with the big boys?
So there's a few questions going on there, but we'll start with Tom's first one, which is who wins the next playoff game first. So would that be TCU getting its second playoff win or Oklahoma getting its first? This is a tough question with a 12-team playoff coming. It really is, because that 16-team Big 12, the 12-team iteration of it, I thought looked like a 2-bid league most years. This 16-team one may be a 3-bid league. And so if TCU is among the best teams in the Big 12 year in and year out, there's a really good chance that TCU makes the playoff as often or more often than Oklahoma in the next 10 years, because Oklahoma will be in the SEC. Obviously, quite a bit of competition. Now, there are going to be years where the SEC probably gets 4 teams in. So Oklahoma is obviously going to have a chance to get in there. And in that format, especially coming from where these two would be coming from, either one of them could win games when they got in there. So I have a hard time picking the answer to this. And maybe my answer depends on what happens next and the answer to Tom's next set of questions. So Tom's next question is, if Sonny Dykes keeps winning the way he did last year, is he going to get hired away somewhere else? And I can probably answer that pretty definitively, because if Sonny Dykes keeps going the way he did last year, if he has 2 more years like that in the next 3, well, guess what? At some point in that stretch, either Texas, Texas A&M, or Oklahoma, or multiple of them, are probably going to be unhappy with who they've got. And they're going to go out after somebody else. And Sonny Dykes is probably going to be that somebody else. Jeff Traylor at UTSA may have something to say about that too. But Sonny Dykes is the guy that those 3 probably would all look at and go, I think he could win here. So that would be the craziest part, is if I answered Oklahoma as the answer to Tom's question, but with Sonny Dykes coaching them because Brent Venables didn't get it done. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think my answer is Oklahoma, and I go back to, it's the same reason I keep giving when people ask me, when will Oklahoma or Texas win the SEC first? And I say Oklahoma, just because Oklahoma tends to be good most of the time. They're ridiculously consistent, have been almost the entirety of the time they've played college football. So it's very hard to bet against them in a situation like this. But that Sonny Dykes scenario, let's say A&M and Jimbo get crosswise at some point. Texas feels like Sark isn't necessarily the guy at some point. Sonny Dykes, if he is winning, not necessarily like last year, because it's going to be pretty hard to recreate last year over and over and over again. But if he's winning pretty consistently, he will be a candidate for that for sure. So that's what it makes it hard also to pick TCU in that respect, because can he stay? Now, to answer Tom's question about would TCU get pulled up, if you win enough, history says you do, which is what happened to TCU. It's what happened to Utah. But the question is TCU a big enough brand? It certainly has the history going back into the Southwest Conference. Is it a big enough brand to justify the, getting into the Super League? I think if you look at how competitive it's been since it's been in the Big 12, I think if you're talking about a 45-team Super League, whatever all that's going to be, I would think TCU deserves inclusion in that. I would think, its location helps, and just the way the program is run over the last 20 years, I do think it would be worth it. But it's the TCU Oklahoma thing, because of the way the 12-team playoff is going to be formatted, it almost feels like a dead heat as to which one of them would win a playoff game next. But that is a great, great set of questions from Tom. We now move on to HJ. Andy, what do you make of the allegations Michael Oher has made against the Tuohy family? With no real details yet, it feels very sad, yet unsurprising. And I agree with that assessment of it. I've read Michael Oher's lawsuit against the Tuohy family. I also saw that Sean Tuohy, who we probably would have referred to him as Michael Oher's adopted father previously, but according to Michael Oher, that's not the case. Let me give you a little bit of the background of the case. So Michael Oher, if you have not heard the story, you've lived under a rock. The story The Blind Side was a book by Michael Lewis. It outlined Michael Oher's story growing up, very tough environment in Memphis. He goes to Briarcrest Christian School. He gets taken in by a family there, the Tuohys, which they owned a bunch of restaurants. They had quite a bit of money. And he ends up going to Ole Miss, ends up becoming an NFL player. And there's a movie based on the book. The book was a bestseller. Sandra Bullock played Leanne Tuohy, the mom of the family in the movie. And so Michael Oher alleges that the family never adopted him. Essentially, they had him sign papers thinking they were adoption papers, but he was already 18, and he was actually signing into a conservatorship, which allowed the family to make legal decisions for him. If you follow the Britney Spears case recently, that's similar situation. So what he's alleging is they made considerable money off the movie The Blind Side. It's actually an NIL story, which is crazy, because this is actual NIL, not what the college football version of it has become, where if you make a movie about someone, a real person, you have to purchase that person's life rights. That's the phrase, life rights. And so Michael Oher apparently signed his life rights away for the movie and didn't realize it. And so he claims that the Tuohys made considerable sums of money, that they split it amongst themselves and their biological children, and he didn't get any of it. Now, Sean Tuohy has punched back here. He told the Daily Memphian that they didn't get much money from the movie. They basically split $14,000 a piece, including a share that went to Michael. And so both sides at odds over what the story is here. And we'll see if we ever get the real story or if there's a settlement. Michael Oher, it's interesting to me that this comes out now. I would have thought with something like this, it would have come out maybe during his NFL career, because he was a successful NFL player. He made plenty of money. He's not doing this for the money either. He's got money. So what prompted this, and why didn't this happen earlier? Because I would imagine this has been simmering under the surface for quite some time. So I would like to find out a little more about this. And if this does inch toward a courtroom, then perhaps there'll be some discovery, and we'll learn a little more of the details, because I do think the details are going to be very important here, because basically you have two sides telling completely different stories, and it is sad. And that story, I remember reading the book. I still have never seen the movie. I figured I read the book. I know what the story is. And that story, Michael Lewis, in, I believe, the acknowledgments or the notes, he lays out, hey, I knew Sean Tuohy. I've known him for a long time. Obviously, there's something to do with them being, big Ole Miss boosters. And interestingly enough, Sean Tuohy, when he talked to the Memphian on Monday, said the conservatorship was a way to appease the NCAA, because they didn't want, this is Sean Tuohy saying this, didn't want Oher to get in trouble with the NCAA because they were big Ole Miss boosters. So I will be very curious to see what the other details of this are, because it just seems like the two stories are very far apart. So the truth, could it be somewhere in the middle? We don't know, but it is sad that this is how it maybe concludes. And, we don't know what's transpired between those parties in the meantime, but it's Michael Oher's story ultimately. And if he didn't get anything for it, then that probably needs to be rectified in some way, shape, or form. Let's move on to Dan's question. This is a fun one, and it's going to probably tick some people off when I answer it.
Hey, Andy, quasi-realignment question here. With the addition of the West Coast teams to the Big Ten, there's an impressive upper middle class of teams. When you think of Washington, Oregon, UCLA, Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Michigan State, if those two figure it out. So power rank all those programs going forward in the Big Ten, how you see the upper middle class playing out, and please put the Badgers number one.
This is a fantastic question from Dan, and he's right. The upper middle class of the Big Ten gets a lot deeper when everybody else shows up. Now, I think the Big Ten needs this from a competitive standpoint, from a product standpoint. I've said I think the SEC's 16-team product is still probably better than the Big Ten's 18-team product, but the gap is very narrow at this point. And so I'm guessing by Dan's omission of USC here that he is putting USC in the upper crust. So we're going to have to, before we do this, we're going to have to all just agree that Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and USC are their own echelon. So it's those four, and we're going to rank the next bunch. Now, I don't know that I can put these teams in specific order. I think I got to do some tiers, but I think it's the top tier feels easy to me, and I think Dan's going to like this. The top tier of this bunch, so we're talking Washington, Oregon, UCLA, Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Michigan State. The top tier of this, and I do think this is pretty mobile. I think I'm just talking about right now as we stand in 2023, and I think your fortunes can change here, but the top tier of this bunch is Oregon and Wisconsin. These are teams that I feel like are talented now, and given the way they're coached and the way they're going to recruit over the next few years, they're going to be capable of building rosters that can compete with those four we mentioned in the upper echelon. Dan Lanning beefing up the talent at Oregon. Luke Fickell helped build Ohio State into what it is right now, then went to Cincinnati, made them the first group of 5 team to make the playoff. Now he's at Wisconsin, and Wisconsin clearly has told him, we're going to give you the resources to be really successful here, because he wouldn't have taken that job otherwise. So Oregon and Wisconsin definitely feel like the top tier of this bunch. Now, just beneath that is Washington. Especially, we've seen what Kalen DeBoer can do. And now that they're going to the Big Ten, if you're Kalen DeBoer, I don't know that you're movable anymore. That was the one thing. When Washington was in the Pac-12, I worried somebody in the Big Ten might steal Kalen DeBoer. Remember when Indiana had those couple magical seasons, magical for Indiana? Kalen DeBoer was a big part of that. And so people know him in Big Ten country, and I was thinking maybe somebody's going to throw some of that Big Ten money at him. But Washington, now a Big Ten school, not getting a full share for a while, but still, you're in the club. And so I think that makes Kalen DeBoer a lot less movable and possibly immovable at Washington, which means they can get considerably better when they have a steady hand on the till. Now, we saw what they could do with Chris Peterson there. Kalen DeBoer, if he just maybe bumps the talent level up a little more beyond where the Peterson era was, but keeps the development similar, you can absolutely be a team that competes for playoff berths in the Big Ten. I think that Iowa probably belongs in this tier as well. Now, we've got off all our jokes about Iowa's offense. I know, I understand. But if Iowa's defense is going to be this consistently good, and Iowa's special teams are going to be this consistently good, if they ever get the offense thing figured out, they could be a very good team even in the new Big Ten, even in the deeper Big Ten. And I still think there's a day coming where Kirk Ferentz says, you know what? I've done a lot here. I think I'm happy with what I've done, and I'm going to ride off into the sunset. And I think LeVar Woods is going to get the job. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see what he does offensively. He's the special teams coordinator right now. He's been the tight ends coach. Oh, what's been the bright spot of Iowa's offense for a long time? Oh, the tight ends. That's right. So that allows you to maybe keep Phil Parker as the defensive coordinator. I think there's a chance that Iowa could definitely be in that second tier of this bunch. And obviously both of those teams could push their way up. UCLA, Nebraska, Michigan State. All of these are capable of moving up. Good recruiting by UCLA in the middle of LA. If Chip Kelly decides that's what he wants to do, he signed a 5-star quarterback this year. That was a little bit different than what we've seen from Chip Kelly in the past. So they're a possibility. Michigan State, we saw the year they went to the Cotton Bowl under Mel Tucker, the one that got Mel Tucker the big contract. It's doable there. We saw Mark D'Antonio have that program as one of the best in the Big Ten. It is doable there. If it's doable at Wisconsin, it is doable at Michigan State. It's just a matter of, can Mel Tucker get it done? He's getting some of those players to come look at East Lansing. He's not getting them to sign on the dotted line come December. If he could ever do that, then they can definitely move up. And then obviously Matt Rule, Nebraska, we know the deal. Lots of potential in that program. Needs to take some baby steps. Needs to get bowl eligible first. But, I think if you talk to the people at Nebraska, you talk to the fans, they understand 1995 is not coming back. But it's utterly realistic that they can be a team that wins 9-10 games a year. The Bo Pelini era was not that long ago, and they're winning 9 games a year. They can be that kind of program that does that, and then every 3-4 years they have a veteran heavy team, and they're competing for college football playoff berths. So they can be in that mix too. But this is what the Big Ten needs beneath the superpowers at the top. that's what makes the SEC so interesting. What makes the SEC so interesting is when a Tennessee becomes good, when Arkansas has a really good team, when Ole Miss or Mississippi State has a really good team, and they all care deeply. The thing about these, with the exception of probably UCLA, they care deeply about football. And I think UCLA's administration does. I don't know that their fan base does. But all of the other fan bases and administrations are 100% in on football. It matters to them. And so I think that's going to make the week-to-week competition in the Big Ten quite a bit more rugged and a hell of a lot more interesting. And Dan, thank you for that question, because you're absolutely right. It is going to be highly, highly entertaining to see what happens in the Big Ten, and especially in, as you term it, the upper middle class of the Big Ten. We now go to Israel. First question I've ever gotten, I think, from someone who is currently in Israel, and it's from Nathan.
Hey Andy, I'm coming to you from Tel Aviv, Israel, the homeland of your former co-host. My question is, why have so many of the talking heads over the past month or so said that the death of the Pac-12 will effectively kill West Coast football? Isn't it just as likely that fan bases in Washington and Oregon and USC will be reinvigorated by having their teams play in conferences that actually matter, playing meaningful games against teams that are actually good for a change? Isn't realignment just as likely to make West Coast football great again?
This is a good question. And so to answer Nathan's question, I think part of it has just been the shock of this conference that we all grew up with, that existed long before most of us were alive, suddenly crumbling before our eyes. I think that's where you're getting that knee-jerk reaction of, oh, West Coast football's dead. No, Nathan's exactly right. West Coast football is not dead. If USC wins the Big Ten, they didn't move USC to the middle of Iowa. Like, it's still in Los Angeles. It is still very close to the Pacific Ocean. So it is West Coast football. It's just the conference members are in different places. So if Oregon, if Washington, if USC, well, maybe even UCLA, but if those teams are competing at the top of the Big Ten every year, that's good for West Coast football. And I do think that probably helps the West Coast people stay home. I was listening to Amon-Ra St. Brown getting interviewed on Pardon My Take the other day, and Amon-Ra went to USC. His brother Equanimeous went to Notre Dame. And he said if Equanimeous had stayed another year, Amon-Ra would have gone to Notre Dame to play with his brother. But since Equanimeous was leaving, Amon-Ra's decision, the final decision was, I'm going to go to USC because I feel like the California kids should play in California. And you think about that. If you keep the Bryce Youngs or the CJ Strouds in California and they don't go to Alabama or to Ohio State, then perhaps those teams are competing for national championships, just as the California transplants help their teams do that. So, yeah, West Coast football is not going anywhere. In fact, some of it is playing in better conferences now. And a lot of it was the Pac-12 itself, this year notwithstanding, because this year the Pac-12 is very much holding its end of the competitive bargain up, but most years it didn't. And so it felt like those teams didn't have to go through the same gauntlet that the teams in the Big Ten or the teams in the SEC did. Well, now they are going to have to go through something like that. Or when you're talking about Utah, Arizona State, Arizona, Colorado, they're going through a gauntlet in the Big 12. The Big 12 is going to be a hyper-competitive conference where just about everybody has a chance. And Elias Gray, the West Coast kids who do go elsewhere are more likely to come back thanks to transfer rules if it doesn't work out immediately. That's true, Elias. And I also think just Lincoln Riley at USC as a Big Ten school, I think that makes USC extremely attractive to anybody, anywhere in the country, but especially to the locals. So I think there's a good chance that USC is the one that breaks it out. We'll put this one from Zach, and this is a really sad story. This happened, this news broke while we were on the air. Former Arkansas running back Alex Collins has passed away at age 28. And so Zach says, what's your favorite memory of the late Alex Collins at Arkansas? I just like watching him run. They called him Diesel, and he ran so freaking hard, and he was perfect on those Brett Bielema teams. And it's just very sad to see that news, because 28 years old, that's awful. So just thoughts and thinking about his family and his loved ones. And it just sucks. That's awful, awful news, but rest in peace, Alex Collins. We got one more serious question to answer, and then we've got a couple fun things, hopefully lighten the mood after that terrible news there. But the next question, this one was very intriguing from Nick. I've been waiting for this. What if a billionaire that's always wanted to own an NFL team suddenly realizes they could own a major college football team via NIL, funds the thing to the tune of $100 million a year, and buys nothing but 4 to 5 star talent? Doable? Are we heading this way? Okay, so the point about a billionaire not being able to afford an NFL team, this is true. They're very expensive. You just saw how much the Commanders sold for. And you can definitely, the get-in price on a college football team is a lot lower. Now, I would argue that we've seen this happen, not necessarily in the NIL era, but we saw it with Boone Pickens at Oklahoma State, where he essentially funded them to the point where they were capable of having the resources of a team in a better league than they were in, or certainly better than they would have otherwise. It helped put them, near the top of the Big 12 resource-wise, where they had been near the bottom before Boone Pickens started pumping all that money in. Oregon and Phil Knight, I think you have a similar situation there. Now, no one has said they're just going to do it to fund NIL. You can talk about the John Ruiz situation at Miami, but I don't really think that's the same thing. It's certainly doable. $100 million a year would be an awful lot, though. I don't know that there's anybody with that much to burn, and especially not that much to burn on a very unpredictable age group. I think if you've been listening to me long enough, you know how I feel about 18 to 22-year-olds, that they are the most unpredictable age group in the world. And so investing that level of cash is risky, because you can have the best recruiting class. I mean, Texas A&M had the best recruiting class last year, and it got them a 5-7 season. Now you can say, okay, you get 4 of those in a row, you've got Georgia. Suddenly you've got Ohio State, you got Alabama. So yes, you are in the mix at that point. You would definitely be in the hunt for national titles. But I don't know that there's anybody willing to burn that kind of cash over it, because the thing about an NFL team, if you're buying an NFL team, even though it's very expensive, history says you're going to make your money back and then some, and probably a lot. You're not really going to make your money back on this. You're doing it because you want to win. You just want to burn it. That's really the only way you can do it. So, that's the question. So, Elias Gray mentions Elon Musk in the chat. That's the type of person. I don't know that he'd get all that interested in college football, but yes, the type of person who would say, I'm going to buy my favorite social media platform for $44 billion. Yes, that's the person with money to burn enough to do something like this. But I don't think we're going to meet that many people. All right, I got a question from Taz here. I know I said one more serious question, and then we get to the goofy stuff. This is new. Taz, lighter question for you. In my 30s now, do I give up looking cool for game day and just accept cargo shorts and game day polos as my game day attire? Listen, Taz, the cargo shorts, I think we all remember that line from Superbad. I don't think I need to say it. It's probably not appropriate for a family audience, but we all know that line. What are you trying to hide a flask? Is that the deal? Let me tell you, and we're not contracted to do this all the time, but you've been watching this show. I've been talking about BirdDogs. Get some BirdDogs, dude. They're not cargo shorts, but the pockets are plenty deep enough. They got lined. They feel like they were made for you. BirdDogs.com/Andy, promo code Andy. Free tech hat. It's beautiful. That'll cover your head in the bright sunshine, and it's nice and light. But the line shorts, you cannot beat it on a hot day. You just can't. And their polos, I started wearing those. Whew, another perfect game day attire. So, you can figure this out, but you don't have to wear the cargo shorts. And here's my problem with cargo shorts now that I have entered this athleisure phase of my life, and it's probably becoming a podcaster and learning about all these companies that sell athleisure. But the cargo shorts are just too heavy. The thick cotton. I mean, if you're out in 98-degree heat, where I live, the heat index every day has been over 105. You can't stand out in a stadium like that with heavy cotton shorts on. You need yourself some athleisure. So birddogs.com/Andy. That's my advice to you. They didn't even pay for an ad tonight. They're getting one anyway, because it's a legit question. You really need to know. Producer River, where's my meatball question? Where's my last question? This one from JS. How many meatballs can you eat in one sitting? I don't know the answer to this, and I'm worried because I might try to find out the answer to this. The listeners of my old show know we had a moment where my former co-host Ari Wasserman mentioned Chick-fil-A nuggets, and I said, I think I could eat 100 Chick-fil-A nuggets in one sitting with utmost confidence. Utmost confidence. And I think there's probably a time in my life when I probably could have gotten close to 100. But Ari said, I'm calling BS on that. I don't believe you. So I went and got a 100 nugget platter. We decided that for every nugget I ate, we would give some money to charity. And I started eating, and it was all during one show. And for the first 35 nuggets or so, I'm like, this is the greatest show I've ever done. This is the best day of my life. Unbelievable Chick-fil-A nuggets. One after another, just down the hatch. I get into the 50s. Stomach starts to turn. I'm just like, oh boy. Uh-oh. I got to 61. I thought I was going to die. So we know where I am on Chick-fil-A nuggets. So meatballs, we may have to place a bet on this during the season. Daniel Garrett asks, how big are the meatballs? What is on the meatballs? These are the questions that matter. And that's exactly right. So we are not talking about Italian restaurant appetizer meatball where you get it and there's a giant meatball with some sauce on it and it's over noodles and you mash it up and that is a dish in and of itself. It's not that meatball. I think we're talking Swedish meatballs. We're talking in that sauce, which, by the way, is going to severely limit how much you can eat. But those little Swedish meatballs, and I've done this at parties. If you have Swedish meatballs in a crock pot at a party, that is where I will post up. I will just take a toothpick, which one after another, pop, 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 pop. So I will say, theoretically, and we may have to test this later, I think I could eat 40 Swedish meatballs in one sitting. I think I could. This is me betting conservatively here, because the old me would have said 65 or 70, but this is me being conservative. I think I could do 40. Matt says rookie mistake on the Chick-fil-A nuggets. You got to go with the grilled nuggets. Matt, we decided not to do the grilled nuggets because we knew I would go over 100 on those. That would be too easy. That might be 150. But the meatballs question, yeah, Swedish meatballs, I think we can pull this off. 40 is realistic. 50 maybe pushing it. The sauce, though, that's my question, because you got to have them in that thick sauce. It's sweet. Brody says he thinks I can get 50 plus. All right, guys, we'll have to figure out if there's a game that we're going to bet on, and my punishment will be figuring out, well, not even a punishment. Maybe we do the charity thing again. Maybe we do a Swedish meatball marathon. I just have the crock pot in front of me, and as I do the show, I'm just popping them in my mouth. We can do this. I like where our heads are at right now. We're in mid-season form, and the first game hasn't even happened yet. I think that's a good sign. That's a very good sign. All right, we move on to the extra point. And this is one that producer River very excited about. He's a Tennessee grad. Guys, guess who's a professor now? Peyton Manning is a professor at the University of Tennessee, an adjunct teaching a class. He's joining the College of Communication and Information as a professor of practice this fall. A nationally recognized media personality, entrepreneur, and sports commentator, Manning will provide transformational learning opportunities. Guys, I think we need to take Peyton Manning's class. That would make a great show. We audit Peyton Manning's class. All right, River, you graduated from the University of Tennessee. You got connections there. Get me a seat in that class. We're going to Knoxville. We're going to have some stock and barrel burgers. We're going to Scrambled Jake's for brunch. We're going to all the places that the Vols took all those recruits that they weren't supposed to take them. And then we're taking Peyton Manning's class. Professor Peyton. I cannot wait. Meanwhile, you shouldn't be able to wait for the next episode of Andy Staples on 3. When we come back tomorrow, Arizona head coach Jed Fish joins the show. Plus, JD Piquel and I are going through some over-unders. He's in